بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. To proceed. So today, inshallah, we'll talk about Islamic finance, and this is like a 1 hour seminar, less than an hour seminar. So it's basically like a very basic primer on Islamic finance. Islamic finance is not easy, it's not simple, it's not straightforward, and there are reasons why it's not easy, simple, or straightforward. First of all, is Islamic finance an oxymoron? And it sounds like one. Because the idea of finance, the idea of tamwil means what? It's basically to provide money. And that idea itself is foreign because man does not have intrinsic value. In Islam, money does not have intrinsic value. It is used as a price for commodities. Basically, man is used as a means of exchange of commodities. So when we're talking about financing, providing money, the idea itself is somewhat foreign to Islam. And I will tell you how Islam answered that need, or how Islam responded to this need. But Islam or Islamic investment is about investment in real projects, in real assets, and real projects. The idea, maybe it's the battery here or something, because it's. The idea, yeah, it just went off. The idea of finance or providing people with money nowadays it is basically a lucrative alternative to reinvestment because you have so many financial instruments and financial structures that circumvent reinvestment. You don't really need to purchase like a herd of cows and raise them and then later sell them or sell their milk or something of that nature, or even real estate or anything. You could be basically developing and creating those various financial instruments and just be like a day trader in the stock market, or continue to devise different financial structures and make money off money, and then make more money off money. You don't ever need to basically be involved in any real investment, in any true real investment. So those lucrative alternatives to true investment will be harmful to growth and development. They will be about individual growth and development. They'll not be about collective growth and development. They're not going to be about uplifting the society in general. It is economically and financially uplifting a certain category or a certain caste in the society, those who are clever with devising those various instruments. Sometimes you want to not even say clever. So, sometimes it's clever, sometimes it's cunning or deceiving, or basically shrewd enough to be able to make money off money. So it's not all the same, and some people can actually be honest traders on the stock market. They're not necessarily making money off money. They're not involved in anything that is haram. But in general, the idea of tamwil, providing money, is not particularly intuitive Islamically. Because in Islam, the Islamic answer to the question of the presence of clever craftsmen who do not have capital and capitalists who do not have skills, the answer, the old Islamic answer to this is called sharaka, and particularly mudaraba, where you have a capitalist who does not have that many skills and a skillful person, whether he's skilled in trading, skilled in crafts, skilled in whatever skills, and they get into sharika, corporation, and this is called mudaraba, because you have the capital coming from one end, and you have the labor coming from one end. But there are different forms of sharikat in Islam, or corporations in Islam. You have sharikat al-abdan, which is basically labor plus labor. I could be an embroiderer and you are a tailor, and we start a business together. I do the embroidery and you do the tailoring, and then we make money out together. And it's like a joint venture or a joint enterprise. That is called sharikat al-abdan. And then you have other forms of sharikat also. You have sharikat al-amwal, where I bring in, I contribute a certain amount of capital, you contribute a certain amount of capital, and we both invest this money into whatever enterprise. Yeah, I think that the batteries are dying. Turn it back on. Okay, so we can basically so the difference here between this sharaka, this joint venture or enterprise, and the concept of tamwil, or to finance. In the concept of financing, you are providing money to someone to risk that money in a real project, but that person will be responsible to pay you back that capital plus profit. And that Islamically is unacceptable, because here you have a guarantee against loss as the capitalist. This poor person is solely responsible for the risks. And you did not really invest your money in any real project. You just loaned your money to someone and expected a return on this non-investment. Your money was not invested. This was loaned to someone. Okay, so since we understand that this is to some extent an oxymoron, should we have stayed out of it and stayed out of financing and did not basically try to devise Islamic instruments of financing? And should we have said that we have mudaraba, that is capital plus labor. We have sharikat al-amwal, that's capital plus capital. We have sharikat al-abdan, that is labor plus labor. We have enough, folks. You figure it out. We don't need to devise any new instruments, because we have enough. And when it comes to true, real investment in real projects, you don't need more than this. Do you need more than this? Think about it. You have skills or labor, and you have money, and that's it. That's all you need for any enterprise. So we have skill, you have sharikat that are based on skill plus skill, capital plus capital, capital plus skill. You don't need anything else. That's it. We're done. But had the scholars done this, then they would have been pretending that these satellite dishes don't actually exist. You could pretend, this is a Muslim country, you see how many satellite dishes are there? Every house has their own satellite dish, or more than one. So you could pretend that they don't exist, and you could pretend that people will actually come to the masjid and listen to Khutbah al-Jam'ah, and that's all the input they'll get for the week. And that's it. They'll come back next week to the Jam'ah, and you just keep on sort of giving them maw'izah every Jam'ah and pretend that they are not getting any input from anywhere else. But that's not the reality. And if that is not the reality, then you have to basically engage the reality that is existent, not the reality that you would like to exist or would like to basically see. So the scholars, then the Muslim scholars, attempted to devise instruments, Islamic instruments of financing that would be Sharia compliant. I want you to remember one thing, because when we go through the following slides, you will say to yourself, but is this really different from regular financing in substance, or is it just like different in technicality, and there is not much difference in substance? And if you're saying this to yourself, don't blame the scholars, blame yourself. Because as an ummah, we do not have the ability to basically, even within our country, within our Muslim countries, like Muslim majority countries, let's say, inside the Muslim majority countries, they don't have the ability basically to dictate their own terms. We are not there to dictate our own terms. We are part of the global system, Therefore, we have to work within the global system, the global economic system. And if you're working within it, you could basically change your seat on the train, move to a different wagon of the train, but you're still on the same train. You're part of that system. You can't really get away or move away or make your own system. Therefore, there would have to be sort of like sometimes talfiq, patching between the different madhab, sometimes overuse of concessions, sometimes sort of technical devices or hayal shar'iyya, legal devices that would get you out of trouble or that would get you around certain obstacles, to be able to provide something for Muslims that is not basically that is not just completely offensive to the Sharia, that is not in absolute contradiction with the Sharia or extreme variance with the Sharia. You're trying to make the best out of what you have. So the scholars, when they sit down to figure out how can we provide financing to Muslims in America to be able to purchase homes, they are working within the system. Eventually, they will need to deal with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And they will need to basically sell those contracts to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Because are we as Muslims, unless you have your own little corporations and so on, then you may be able to avoid that. But are we as Muslims able to provide capital for, let's say 100,000 Muslim families to purchase homes next year in 2018? You know how much would that be? 100,000 Muslim families purchasing homes? We can multiply it. 100,000 times what? How much? If you're from New York, then depends. Huh? $2 billion? Okay, so are we as a community here in America able to come up with this? So that we can say, we don't need the Freddie Mac anymore, we're just going to do it ourselves. We're not. Looks like we're not. And even if we are, but Muslims are not willing to do it. Even if, like someone said tomorrow, let's start a company, guys, guys on both sides. So people, let's start a financing company, and let's be self-dependent, and let's have Muslims contribute to this company and invest in this company. Well, the Muslims actually contribute enough money for this company to be viable. Now, therefore, what we are doing is we're trying to make the best out of what we have. Not only from an economic standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint. Because you're here in America. And many times when we were sitting, when Hamza, invited some of the CEOs and the Sharia supervisory boards of some of the Islamic financing companies to a conference, and we sat down with them and we talked about certain issues that we did not like about their contracts. Oftentimes the answer was, this would not fly, this would not go through. We have our legal team, and this is not going to work. Within the system, we tried it, we attempted it, and so on. So that is also another reality. That's another angle to this. So there are some economic challenges, and also they have to work within the legal framework that is existing here in America if they want to provide financing here in America. Keep this in mind, because you will come back and tell me, so what's the difference? And I will, try to be as convincing as I can and tell you, here is the difference, but it may not convince you. You may say, it doesn't really, cut it for me. I don't think it's enough. Okay, so it is not simple. Islamic financing is not simple. Whether it is here in America, in the West in general, or even in Muslim countries, it is not simply by, writing your title in Arabic. And that does not make it halal. So you just you make a company, and then you write the name of the company in English, and underneath you write it in Arabic. And people, think that's it, we're done. It is not really as simple as that, and it takes so much work, and it takes so much effort, and brainstorming, and sometimes for some of those companies, basically to be able to get licensed in some of the states, the different states, it takes so much effort for them to simply get licensed to work in that state. So some of those companies may not be able to access certain markets in certain states. Okay, so the philosophy of generally financial investment, financing, any financial transactions in Islam, what do we need to avoid? What are the big things that we need to avoid in order for this to be halal? First, the subject matter of the contract itself has to be halal. The subject matter of the contract has to be halal. I can hire someone for labor. I can give someone, hire someone for ja'ala, which is basically compensation for a project, and I can tell this person, build this fence for me. Or I could tell this person, I want you to basically hurt someone for me. I could do anything. The contract itself seems to be halal, whether it is do this or do that, but the subject matter of the contract has to be halal. So it is not only sales, it is any subject matter of any contract. The subject matter of the contract has to be halal in itself. It is not only that I cannot sell pork or wine, it is not only that I cannot sell tobacco, but any contract, any agreement, ijara, ja'ala, anything, the subject matter of the contract needs to be halal for this to be halal. And then when it comes to the contract itself, when it comes to the process itself, we have to make sure that these three biggies are not, it's not just those three, but these are the biggest prohibitions in financial transactions in Islam. Riba, which is basically interest-bearing transactions, Yeah, I guess. Gharar, which is undue risk-taking. That's like the counterpart of gambling, gambling in play, gharar in transactions. So it is undue risk-taking, or you could say excessive uncertainty, but it could also be excessive ambiguity. Ambiguity, uncertainty, undue risk-taking, all of this is under gharar. And then ghabn, which is inequity, and also socially irresponsible enterprises. So inequity or socially irresponsible enterprises that are basically unfair to the individual or the collective, to the person or the society. So the first one is it has to be halal, so you cannot basically sell something that is haram, and you cannot sell something that is useless, and you cannot sell something that is harmful. So all of these are forbidden sales because the subject matter itself is not halal to sell. So it is either something that's najis or something that is useless. You can't sell something that's useless, by the way, because that would be basically exploitation of the naivety of someone who does not really know that this thing that you're selling them is useless. But useless varies, across times and places and cultures. So you can't use you sell something that's useless, something that is harmful, something that is najis, something that is haram. And the subject matter of the contract has to be halal. So you cannot hire someone to do something for you that is haram. Then the next one, which is a big one, is like no riba. There should be no riba. Keep this in mind because I want you to be somewhat able to look out for problems in your dealings, in your financial dealings. You want to have a checklist in your mind to go by, and then you check certain things off. You want, as an individual, without going back to the sheikh every time, because you may not be able to go back to the imam or the sheikh every time and ask questions, but you want to be able to have a checklist, a mental checklist that you go through it whenever you embark on a transaction. So the second one is no riba. No riba means what? Means that this picture there's something wrong about this picture. What is it? Yes. Money does not have any intrinsic capacity to grow by itself. Money has to be invested in real projects to grow. In Islam, money does not beget money. It just doesn't happen. So you put money wherever you put it, you put it in your whatever locker or your bedroom, your living room, you loan it to someone, you put it in a safe box. You come back, you find the same amount of money that you left, even if you give it to someone. Because in this case, if you give it to someone without this being part of a real investment, like in mudaraba or a form of corporation, this money does not have any intrinsic ability to grow. You will come back and find it the same. So any transaction, any exchange of money for money should not be a for-profit transaction. If it is about money for money, if it is money for money, it should not be a for-profit transaction unless you're talking about two different types of currency and you will do the exchange hand-to-hand, immediate exchange of two different types of currency, then you could make profit off of this. Two different types of currency, sterling pounds and dollars, immediate exchange hand-to-hand, then you could make money off of this. But even with this, you have to be very careful because the transaction must be an immediate transaction. there should be no deferment here in this transaction. So you have to be also very careful. So there are a lot of restrictions on money for money. But in general, generally speaking, money does not beget money. Any money for money transaction should not lead to any profit. Now, so sometimes we want to figure a way to get around this, right? Or somebody wants to figure a way to get around this. Like, let's say, governments, for instance. The governments want your money. And the governments do not want to get into a sort of a partnership with you that will give them headache, and you come back and sue them, and it's like complicated. So they want to get your money and figure out how to Islamicize the concept of bonds. How do you Islamicize the concept of bonds? Then we would have to basically sort of create an Islamic instrument that will be halal. So let's figure out how to do it. We figure out something like sukuk, for instance. Sukuk would be the Islamic form of bonds. And sukuk is when a government, let's say the government, and I'm not going to mention the names of any countries because people everyone has like their own allergies to like this country or that country. So to avoid any sort of anaphylactic shock here or any allergic reaction. Just let's say country XYZ, a Muslim country XYZ. They wanted they wanted cash. This country has assets, so they don't want to sell those assets. They'll make they'll make bonds whereby they sell you those assets, and then they lease them from you. Smart, isn't it? So I'll transfer the ownership, and then I will lease it from you. I'll transfer the ownership of, my sort of buildings and that sort of whatever assets, but real assets. And then they will tell you what assets exactly. And then they will say that I have those assets, this is the value of those assets, and I will divide them into this many shares, and I will basically sell the shares, and then I will lease those assets or those buildings from you and give you rent, like a monthly rent for the next 5 years. And then, so how do they repossess the assets at the end of the 5 years? Then we get into how could we create devices that will make this in a halal way, and we get into this cannot be done. Basically, we cannot do this now. We cannot make a sale contract now that will be that will materialize in 5 years. Then we have the binding promise, but the binding promise involves one party, because if it's a binding promise that is binding bilaterally, then it is basically a sale contract, and we can't do that. But then they come up with ideas to figure out how we can do this, because they figure out, the Muslim scholars that are doing this are not really trying to be deceptive or anything. They're just seeing that the governments are saying to them, we want money. The people are saying to them, we want the security of giving, the security of investing with the government. Do you know that Germany, not so cool, but Germany put up bonds with negative yield because people wanted German stability so much in uncertain times that they would accept some loss. They would accept some loss, but at the end of the day, they're keeping their money with the German government. So it's German stability, German credibility, etc. So So that is what the scholars are trying to do. The scholars are having, the governments are showing interest in this, the public is showing interest in this. So the scholars are trying to basically create devices that will help them do this in a way that is not confrontational with the Sharia, that is not sort of like audaciously antagonistic to the Sharia. Then the concept of gharar, which is no gharar. No gharar means no uncertainty. Yeah.
Is there a way to rationalize why riba is so haram?
Well, there are so many things about riba. Riba provides an alternative to real investment. When people are exchanging money for money, that money is not circulating. That money is not causing real growth and development. It's not circulating. It's not trickling down to the people. So when you are forced to invest, you buy a herd of cows and you invest in them. Real estate, you go into a mudaraba with some trader or craftsman or like a plumber, you start a store with them, and it is a real investment. But riba is to exchange money for money and to get a profit for the deferment. You're getting a profit for only just the deferment. So that is one thing. And that is why they always tell you that the lower down the interest rates are, the more this boosts the economy. Because people, basically, what is it called? What is it called? What relationship? It is, reverse sometimes. Yeah, reverse relationship between the interest rates and the growth of the economy is a hint to this fact that you want to bring it down all the way to zero to boost the economy. The other thing is when money begets money without labor being involved in this, that basically boosts the value of money versus labor. Now, money is not dependent on labor to grow. Therefore, this creates, this widens the gap between the socioeconomic strata of the society. You will have the capitalists that are exchanging money for money, or recirculating money and making money off of money, and you have the laborers that are taking all the responsibility for the losses without the capitalists being responsible. The capitalists are just having their money grow without taking responsibility. That is why when we talk about Islamic finance, or when we talk about the real in a different world where Islamic finance is truly being implemented, we're talking about full responsibility, full accountability, full transparency, maybe in a different world. But these are just some reasons why riba has been forbidden by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when it comes to the concept of gharar, or the concept, we have so many practical examples of transactions that were prohibited by the Prophet ﷺ because of that gharar. That gharar could be in the sale, or in the procedure itself, or it could be in the subject matter. So how could you have gharar in the subject matter? If you sell something that is not existent, something that is absent, something that is not deliverable, something that is not identified or identifiable, you sell one out of many things, and you tell them, I sell you one out of those 100 cows. Or I sell you, whatever comes out in my net. I'll throw my net in the sea, and whatever comes out, whatever number of fish that will come out they'll be for yours for $5 or $10, or the birds in the sky or something of that nature. So in this case, this is gharar in the subject matter of the contract. But you could also have gharar in the process, and there are many different types of gharar in the process itself. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet, for instance, forbade bay' al-hasa, which is casting stones. So when you cast like a stone or a pebble, and whatever it falls on, it becomes yours for a fixed price. So wherever your stone falls, or you could even throw your stone, and whatever the distance of land the stone travels, the land will be yours for a fixed price. So what the point here is that Islam wanted to remove uncertainty and ambiguity and undue risk-taking. What is the example of undue risk-taking that complicated the financial crisis, the last financial crisis that we went through? Insurance. So riba and insurance together, riba and gharar together, were behind the financial crisis. Because if you looked at the subprime mortgage crisis, people were over-lending to people and giving them so much money for their property, because riba, when you lend money for profit, you're not really responsible for the loss or the gain from this profit. So if someone comes to you wanting to buy a house for $300,000, then if you give them $300,000, you make profit off of what? The house or the $300,000? The $300,000. What if you give them $350,000? Do you make more profit? Yes. $400,000, more profit? Yes. So you are tempted to overlend money. You are tempted to give more, and you don't really need to verify, whether this house will actually be worth it or not. And why do you not need to verify? Because in case this person actually defaulted on the contract, your contract itself is insured. So you'll get your money anyway. Because you will take this contract after you make the contract and insure it, and in case the person defaulted on the contract, you will get your money from the insurance company. So what got us in trouble? What got us in trouble is that so many people defaulted at the same time that the insurance companies themselves failed. And when they failed, banks failed, and the domino effect went down from the top down. And that is why, during this time, you remember they were saying we cannot afford for AIG, American Insurance Group, to fail, because it's just disastrous. So we will have to bail them out. But that is what caused the problem. So it is a combination of riba, because when riba is about money for money. I give you more money, I make more profit. Because it is not about your loss or gain. It is not about the enterprise itself. My profit is pegged to or fixed to the capital I gave you, not the profit you will make or the loss you will suffer. So that's the problem with riba. The problem with gharar or uncertainty, and you must have heard me say this before, but after the crisis, the last crisis we went through, the G20 summit or the G8 summit that took place right after this crisis, they stressed the importance of reducing undue risk-taking, or reducing speculation in the markets and undue risk-taking, which is basically reducing the gharar, uncertainty and ambiguity in the financial transactions. Last is no government or no inequity. So, and also social irresponsibility will be under this. So certain things, certain financial transactions that were forbidden by the Prophet, such as nudge, for instance, which is provocation, to outbid someone just to higher the price for them, or outbidding after the seller had shown approval of the last buyer's bid, or other sort of socially irresponsible transactions. They were forbidden because they are socially irresponsible. There is some form of inequity in them. So Gabn is another category also. It is not only in sales, but it is in financial transactions in general. So if I am the landlord, or the lessor, and you are the tenant, the lessee, and I ask you to be responsible for everything. I'm the landlord, but I ask you to be responsible for everything that happens, whether or not you committed any form of transgression or negligence. That is called inequity. That is called the ghabn, because it is unfair, for the lessee to be responsible. You leased this house to me, and now if something happens to the house, like something huge happens, disastrous happens to the house, you should be responsible. It is your house. I'll just use it. I purchased from you the temporary enjoyment or usage of the usufruct or the manfa'a of this house for a certain period of time. I should not be responsible for what happens to the house except if I committed transgression or negligence. So Ghabn is not only limited to sales, but it is in all financial transactions. Now, okay, so what are the instruments that we have? Ijara, very simple instrument that we have for financing. You cannot buy a house. Don't purchase a house. In an Islamic model, if you can't buy something, don't purchase it. You will find some other way to use it or to benefit from the usufruct of that commodity. If it is a house, rent instead of buying. Sometimes you may even go to someone and tell them, purchase this house for me, and I will rent it from you. And that is a way of financing. You want something, but you can't pay for it. You tell somebody else, you purchase it, you own it, and rent it out to me, and I'll use it and pay you rent. That's a very simple device. The lessee does not guarantee losses except in the case of transgression or negligence in order for this contract to be compliant. Now, a branch of this contract is called ijara ending with ownership. Ijara muntahiya bil-tamlik, ijara ending with ownership. The same concept will apply. Lessee does not guarantee losses except in the case of transgression or negligence. But ijara muntahiya bil-tamlik, or ending with ownership, it's about promise to transfer the ownership, binding only on the lessor, not the lessee. Okay, so the lessor or the landlord will tell you, I will basically give you this house to live in, you pay me rent for 30 years. After the end of the 30 years, we cannot have another contract. We can't have a sale contract because we are having a lease contract. And you can't have two contracts for one product or commodity or item. So this will be a promise, not a sale contract, not a sale contract. So you will say that for 30 years you will use this house, and at the end of the 30 years, I promise to give it away to you. I promise to give it away to you. Now, this is a promise binding from one side, but do you think that the lessee will reject that at the end of the 30 years and say, no, I don't want it, thank you, you keep it? Well, it's never going to happen. Therefore, but at the end of the day, this is not a finalized contract. It is still a promise, binding on one party. a promise binding on one party. But this is a promise of hiba, gift. So it doesn't look like the other party will reject that promise at the end of the 30 years. In this case, it is basically a clear-cut lease towards ownership, or lease ending in ownership. The amount that you will pay every month, they will factor this in. They'll figure this out among themselves. The financier will figure this out. How much money do I need to basically charge them for rent so that it makes sense to me financially?
If the promise includes paying some amount at the end, like I promise to sell it to you at the end of 30 years if you pay me $50,000.
That is fine if that is binding on one side, not both sides. If it is bilaterally binding, it's a problem. Binding on one side, it's okay, it's still a promise. Or I could also say at market value, or a fixed price, that is fine. So do we understand this concept, إجارة منتهية للتمليك? That here, the principle that we have to watch for here is what? Two issues. One, the sale is not finalized, it is just a promise that will be finalized upon the ending of the ijara. The second thing, that the lessee does not guarantee losses except in the case of transgression or negligence. What if the lessor told you, I want you to guarantee the losses, or I want you to pay for insurance so that the losses are mitigated, and consider that the price of the insurance part of the lease. Okay, that would make it a problem. There would be a little bit of incompliance here, lack of compliance. Does that make the primary contract itself an invalid contract? That's another issue. People will argue about this. But if there are pressing needs and legal issues, legal constraints and stuff like this, we may say that this contract may be tolerated despite this iniquity and this incompliant clause because of the hardship and the difficulties and so on and so forth. Since the primary contract itself is okay. Yes?
I thought you said that in currency trading a forward contract would be not acceptable. So how does a forward contract in currency differ from this situation, where you are willing to pay?
There is no contract. There is no forward contract here. But the idea also of forward contract, so that the terminology, we have to watch the terminology because it can mean different things. You know, in Islam, the prohibition is bay' bil-kala is prohibited, which is deferment of both ends of the contract. But deferment of one end of the contract is permissible if we're talking about non-usurious items with certain guidelines when the deferment is the deferment of the price, and more guidelines and restrictions when the deferment is the deferment of the commodity and advancing the price. But when you defer both ends, that is not permissible. Here there is no deferment of contracts. Here there is no contract. There is a promise binding on one side. Had this promise been binding on both sides, it would have basically amounted to a contract. But it is a promise binding on one side only. Therefore, it is still valid, it's not a contract. Yes? But if you want, for this ambiguation, interrupt me. But I'm afraid that I'm going to run out of time before I go over the... So if you allow me just, I have only 10 minutes here. Murabaha is the other form of Islamic financing that we have, the other device that we have. And murabaha, here's what we need to watch for when it comes to murabaha. Murabaha is cost plus sale. It is markup sale, cost plus sale, whatever they call it. They call it different names, but it is murabaha. The concept here is that you want to buy this house, you don't have the money. You go to the bank and you tell them, buy this house for me, and then I promise to purchase it from you for more. That's fine. The issue here is, how is this different from the bank giving you like a mortgage? Let me tell you. The bank will go and buy this house. And then if you died in the interim, between the bank buying the house and selling it to you, who's responsible for the house? The bank is responsible for the house. Did the bank take some risk in this transaction, in this enterprise? Yes. Al-Haj bil-Daman. Profit is tied to risk in Islam. If you don't take risk, you don't make profit. So that is how capital shows responsibility. Capital must take risk to make profit, right? In this scenario, the bank took some risk. Now, the bank can come back and figure out ways to mitigate this risk as much as possible, but at the end of the day, what we want to make sure of is that the bank had complete ownership of the product, the commodity, before he sold it to me. If he did, or if they did, it did, the bank did, then that transaction is a halal transaction. But here's another issue. I told them, go and buy this for me, and I promised to buy it. Once you bought it, I promised to purchase it from you. Is my promise binding? Yes, it is binding. This is the position in the Maliki madhab that everybody, that basically Islamic financing all hinges on this position. If we lose that position, we're done. You know, it's just like, so this is the position in the Maliki madhab that everybody uses, which is al-wa'd al-munzil, the binding promise. In the Maliki madhab, if you promise someone something and you take it back, and taking it back will harm that person or entity, you are responsible. But does that mean, how much am I responsible for? I am responsible for some fine to mitigate the loss for the bank to some extent, or the harm that the bank incurs to some extent. But I'm not responsible for the whole price. It's not like, you know, the bank went and bought the house for $250,000. And now I come back and say to the bank, well, I don't want to buy it. Then the bank is stuck. The bank really doesn't want to own houses. So the bank is stuck. Then if I am responsible for the $250,000, then that is haram for sure. You know why? Because that means that the bank sold the house to me before it bought it from the original owner. And that is not halal, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Tahkim al-Nahsan, la tabi' ma laysa indak." Do not sell that which you do not own, or that which you do not possess. Okay, so, but here, I am responsible for like a fine, you know, $20,000, $30,000, to mitigate some of the bank's loss, because I got them into this and walked away. Keep in mind, if I die, the bank is responsible for everything. Like, let's say the bank just bought the house, and before the bank turned around and sold it to me, I died. The bank is responsible. So did the bank take some risk? It did take some risk. It deserves some profit. And how do they make the profit? At the markup. They buy the house for $250,000 in cash. They turn around and sell it to me for $400,000 in installments over 20 years or more or less. And that's how they make the profit. This is deferred payment. There is no riba here. Why there is no riba? Because this is house for money, commodity for price. This is not price for price. This is not money for money. Even in the Bible, where Jesus, peace be upon him, walked into the temple and flipped the tables of the money changers. Changing money for money is not allowed. Promise to buy is binding, but no sale before acquisition by bank. Promise to buy is binding. Here it is different from ijara. Here the promise is binding from my side only, not from the bank's side, from the client's side only. In ijara, the promise, ijara mutahabit tamlik, ending with ownership, the promise was binding from which side? The bank's side. Okay. Next is musharaka. Musharaka is basically what is, Islam provided this, and I told you, given that we live in a different world where investment is a real project, you would have had, plenty of options. Because musharaka could be labor plus labor, labor plus capital, capital plus capital. And all of these are allowable in Islam, and we have a perfect system basically to share with anyone who wants to use it. So two capitals working together, musharaka in the sense of two capitals here, because I defer to mudaraba, which is capital plus labor, to the end, and I did not talk about labor plus labor because we're talking about financing here. We're talking about money. I'm not talking about the embroiderer and the tailor coming together and working together. So we're talking about money. So at the end, I will talk about mudaraba because mudaraba is more beneficial as a financing tool than sharaka in the current market. But sharaka is two capitals working together. Profit sharing is by mutual agreement, and losses are proportionate to the capitals invested. الربح على ما اتفق والوضيعة على رأس المال. So in musharaka, you contribute like $20,000, I contribute $80,000, we invest this money, we decide how much profit, what is the percentage? The percentage is not from the capital, percentage is from the profit. So we decide how much of the profit will be yours and how much will be mine. We could say 50-50. Why 50-50? Because there could be other considerations. I got you into this business. I know more about this business. So in this case, we could divide the profit 50-50, even though we contributed 20-80. But we could divide the profit 50-50. But when it comes to losses, the losses are pegged to or fixed to what? The capital. So when it comes to losses, I contributed 20% and you contributed 80%, we lose in the same amounts or percentages. So I lose 20%, I bear 20% of the losses, you bear 80% of the losses. Is that clear? And musharaka is basically when I can, so as Muslims, how do we use this? If I can start this business alone, if I want to have like a business, if I want to start a business, sell, mobile phones, a mobile phone business, and I can't really start the business alone, I come to my brother and tell him, let's, start with this business. We work together, we figure things out. I know more about it, I'll get a little bit more of the profit, but we will share the losses, or you will get a little bit more of the profit, and that is how we work together. And we really need to use this. This is like a good way, and instead of going to the bank and borrowing money to start this business alone, join hands with your brothers, start the business, and grow slowly. Purchase another store, after a couple of years, and grow slowly like this. That's more also very nice. It will work. Okay, so we have musharaka ending with ownership. Musharaka ending with ownership is basically a branch from musharaka, but in this case, this is called, sharaka al-mutanaqisa al-muntahiya bit-tamlik. So it is declining co-ownership ending with, ownership. One person buying out the other, or one entity buying out the other. And this is the murabaha and musharaka and the ijara also. Ijara, muntaha bit-tamlik. These are the three devices that are being used in North America to finance houses and I don't know, cars maybe. So musharaka ending with ownership. Okay, there are a couple of issues that we want. Like too small. So we have three contracts, but one-sided promise from the client to lease the share of the financier and purchase different units of the share of the financier at different stages. Okay, so we have three different contracts. The first contract is that you and I co-own this. I basically purchase 20% of it, but you purchase 80% of it, and then you have 80% of the property, I have 20% of the property. Then I promise you, even before we purchase, I will promise you, this will be a promise binding only from one side. I promise you that I will then rent the 80% that I will rent from you, the 80% that you own, and buy it in installments, in units, in smaller units, over the next 25 years or 30 years. So now let's say that we did this. The first month I will pay you rent for the 80%, and then I will pay you a portion of the price of this unit, because I will, let's say, buy 10% of this unit over the next year. So first month I'll pay you for 80%. And then, let's say after 1 year, I purchased 10%, so you own 70%, and I own 30%. I will rent the 70% from you, I'll pay you rent for the 70%, and so my rent will diminish, right, will decrease, because every few years, I'm owning more, you're owning less, so my rent will decrease. But in order for this to be practical for the public, they figured out a way to basically put this in the blender and give you one monthly installment. So the first month, the first month, for instance, this will be the rent, and this will be your contribution to the purchase price. And then in 30 years, this will be the rent, and this will be your contribution to the purchase price, and then you buy me out. Now that we have this sharaka, the co-ownership, declining co-ownership that ends in one entity buying out the other entity, we have certain conditions to make it compliant with the Sharia. The conditions, it has to be real co-ownership. So you should be responsible for the 80% of the house that you own, and I'm responsible for the 20%. Now, this would be logistically difficult, and some legal issues also that, here in America, this is not going to basically work for some reason or another, and we hope, and we always, so that's why in AMJA, when we said these contracts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are permissible, we said permissible for a need because the clauses in the contract are not still 100% compliant. The clauses within the contract. So we said permissible for a need. But also, AMJA decided that the need is present for the entire Muslim community. Who would not be in need? Someone who owns like $4 or $5 million and wants to buy like a $400,000 house, it's obvious that he doesn't have the need if he has the cash. Or someone who owns like $20 million or something. It's obvious that they don't have the need if they have the cash. but the need is applicable. So why did we say that there is a haja amma, there is public need, so that we don't basically burden the individual Muslim of having to go to the imam and tell him, here are my circumstances, here is my tax return, here is all the money that I have, and I want you to help me figure out if I actually do have a need or don't have a need. So the default is that everybody has a need, except the wealthy who could easily afford to purchase houses in cash. Is that clear? Because of this need of the general public, we said that we will overlook with certain incompliant clauses in the contract, because primary, secondary clauses are shown more leniency than the primary subject matter of the contract itself. In Sharia, secondary clauses, you show more leniency to secondary clauses than you show to the primary subject matter of the contract. The problem in this particular contract is that what we call it co-ownership, but in reality, and if you're wondering, when you call some of those companies and you wonder, that doesn't look really like a co-ownership, because I'm responsible for anything, and if anything happened to the house, I'm responsible for it, and they're forcing me to pay for the insurance company, to pay to the insurance company, and to insure the house, and so on. So how is this co-ownership? Let me tell you. If the house was totaled, and the insurance company refused to pay you the full amount, so let's say that the house was totaled, the insurance company paid you $80,000, and you borrowed $100,000, and the insurance company paid you only $80,000. The Islamic companies that provide this instrument, they will tell you, or device, they will tell you that we will take from you 80% of the $80,000 the insurance company paid you. We will not be after you for 80% of the $100 that we lent to you. They are showing in this case that they are co-owners. That's like one sort of practical example of their co-ownership. They're showing in this case that if this was a conventional mortgage, the bank does not care how much you got from the insurance company. The bank gave you 100, they wanted the 100. Except in certain cases, in certain places, it may be. But we're saying here that this is really not co-ownership, and so you're asking one of the two owners more than you're asking the other one. Sheikh Muhammad Taqi Uthmani, he came up with this idea. I think he was the first one to come up with this idea, but it appealed to many of the mashayikh afterwards, and they sort of reflected on it, and it appealed to them that there is, Sheikh Muhammad Taqi Uthmani, those of you who are from Pakistan, they know him well. Those of you who are not, if you are part of the sort of the scholarly community, you know him well. But he's an important scholar from Pakistan. And he's part of the Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. But he then made that distinction between Sharikat al-Mulk or Sharikat al-Milk or Sharikat al-Aqd. Sharikat al-Milk and Sharikat al-Aqd. But we don't have time because we were already 8 minutes over the time. But he made distinctions, and he said that this is Sharikat Milk, this is not the Sharikat al-Aqd, this is not a contractual partnership, this is partnership in property, in the ownership of a property, and the rules that apply to the contractual partnerships do not necessarily apply to this. So there will be a promise here. They will also ask you to promise them that you will not sell the property before 30 years. And if you decided to sell the property, you have to buy them out first and then sell the property. And in this case, you accrue all the profits, you incur all the losses. Last but not least, is mudaraba. And mudaraba, this is more for business enterprises. This is not for financing your home. Mudaraba, we said that there are different types of sharikat. There are 5 different types of share capital. We're taking 3 that are prototypes. You know, labor plus labor, labor plus capital, and capital plus capital. This is labor plus capital. This is capital coming from one side, labor coming from one side. This could work with factories, would work for commercial enterprises, where you go to the bank and tell them, you know, I want to expand my factory. I want to add like an addition to my factory. I want you to help me out with this. The bank tells you, well, we will help you, but we will hire some monitor to figure out if you're doing things right or not, like someone to monitor this, or like a supervisor to monitor whether you're doing things. You agree and they incorporate this in the price and stuff. And they give you the money, they share the profit with you. This is just like wholly wholesome. This is like a classical Islamic way of financing. There is no creating devices here or circumventing anything. And this would actually work. So one partner gives money to another to invest in a commercial enterprise. The profit is based on an agreement, and the loss is on the capital. And I'm sorry for taking 10 minutes more than my time. Inshallah, we will stop here and take your questions, and maybe when we take your questions, we'll elaborate more on some of those issues that may have been a bit ambiguous. Yes.
How does a Sharia compliant loan work for refinancing? Say, for example, somebody did a mistake and took a loan from a conventional bank, but they would like to refinance. Does a Sharia compliant loan does that to you? And if they do,
Sharia compliant loan?
For a murabaha, for example.
No, but keep in mind, the word Sharia compliant loan means a benevolent transaction, not a for-profit transaction. There is no loan in Sharia that results in any worldly profit. Loans in Sharia are given for benevolent reasons, for the sake of the profit in the hereafter, if we use the word loan.
I see. So, like a mortgage, for example.
Sharia compliant financing.
Sharia compliant financing.
Yes.
Okay.
So somebody bought a house using a conventional loan.
Yes.
They would like to refinance the house using the Sharia compliant financing. Is that allowed?
That is allowable, possible. You want to call some of those companies, they'll tell you the procedure.
And the equity you made in the house, is that considered halal and your own money, or is that something?
It is your own money, because here you were not the consumer of riba. You were actually the payer of riba. You paid riba, you did not consume it. So whatever equity you made on the house or profit, it is yours. Sisters? Just shout whenever you have a question.
Can I make a comment here?
Yes.
You know, I've looked into it in the past. You know, part of my ignorance here, I'm not a religious scholar or anything. The analogy that I built up in my mind is like, you know, when the Jews cast their nets on Friday night.
That's why I started by the long introduction that I started with. But this is...
No, with all due respect, you know, what I'm saying is, I mean, in regards to his question, can I buy Sharia? Well, probably resell it to Freddie Mac, right? So, and that's why you said from the get-go, you said, you know, this promise is not a contract. That way you can free yourself of any binding agreement, right?
But what can we do? No, I'm taking your opinion, really. This is
I'm not a scholar.
but this is really sort of like a very friendly, brotherly discussion. What can the scholars do? Like, if we want to have our own system, we don't have the traction, the power, the strength, economic or otherwise, to make our own system, not even in our countries. we're part of the global system.
I heard it.
So we have to work within the global system. One thing the scholars can do is just go ahead, deal with clear-cut, usurious transactions, clear-cut, ribawi transactions. In this case, we are tearing apart the fence between people and the concept of haram itself. We're saying to the people, it's just like, it's free buffet. Do whatever you want, get whatever contract you want. Should we try to avoid the clear-cut haram, even though we will have difficulties and we will have issues and stuff? That is what they're trying to do. They're not the analogy of casting the net on the Friday and basically putting it out on Sunday is unfair to the scholars because they're just not doing this for, they have a reality that they live in.
Of their own.
Yeah, here is the reality. The overall system is not ours. We're not the drivers. We are not the drivers. It is not on the scholars. It is on us collectively as an ummah, including the scholars. And I'm not saying that the scholars are pure and it is all the ummah's problem, it's all the problem of the public or the masses, and if you guys get your act straight, we will not be in trouble. It is our problem collectively, whether we are scholars, leaders, public, our problem collectively. Our problem collectively is that as an ummah, we cannot basically, in our Muslim majority countries, dictate our own terms, let alone, outside.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, once again, I'm not trying to be offensive or anything. I'm just speaking out loud because I'm trying to understand myself. You set an example from the very beginning. You said, if we were to buy houses for 100,000 people, we don't have the ability or capability of doing it. And you wish you had the money to do it, which, then it would be fully, invested in the.
Then I will not have the economic challenge, but I will still have the legal challenge because I'm still here in America.
All right. Well, I guess my point is, the way I look at it, these financial institutions that were built, they were built for quick.
But are the sisters able to hear you?
No, I don't think they can.
They were built.
Can you higher your voice so that the sisters can hear you? Or
I think the financial systems, the Sharia financial systems that were built, they were built to make quick profit. The answer to the example that you set out earlier, when you said 100,000, you don't have to buy 100,000 houses. Why don't you buy only 1,000 houses within your capability as a financial institution, make a profit off of that thing, and
Then I'm not answering the needs of my community. I'm answering the needs of 1% of my community. Like, what about the 99% of the community? There is, keep in mind, Amjad, Sheikh Muhammad knows this, whoever read the Amjad Declaration knows this. Amjad said that Amin housing in California are halal to deal with, even without a need. They're just halal to deal with. Because Amin housing in California came to Amjad and said, here is our contract. Whatever it is that you don't like about our contract, change it. Make it halal. It doesn't get any better than this. So if they're coming to a Sharia board and they're telling them, don't call us halal for a need, make us 100% compliant. Here's our contract, here's like a red pen, make us 100% compliant. So they are compliant, but why are they compliant? Because they don't need to sell the contract later on to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. So they have the leisure to be completely compliant in that sense. They may encounter some legal difficulties in some states, but that is not the issue. But they are they are compliant. Sharia-wise, they're 100% compliant. But how many houses can they afford to buy? Have you heard of Amin housing? No. Has anyone here heard of, unless you're interested, or you read some, but no one here heard of green housing? Because they can't really get out of California. They can't get out of their community in California. But what about the rest of the Muslims? Well, these are practical issues. This is not, I'm not trying to prove you wrong or anything, because I sympathize with your sort of rationale. I know that, in order for Islamic finance to really prosper, the GDP of the Arab countries should not be less than the GDP of France. And it is. The GDP, we're talking about how filthy rich the Arabs are, the Gulf, and keep in mind, all this is just like delusions that we have. We're trying to pacify ourselves, but the GDP of all the Arab countries is less than the GDP of France, including the filthy rich. And so you can't really dictate your terms in a world where you're not contributing, and you have not been contributing to the to anything in the last how many how many centuries. But in order for you to dictate your own terms, you will have to be economically capable of doing so. And now, since there is more interest in Islamic financing, people are trying to start to listen. Since the Muslims, the public, they are trying to stay away from riba. And since the scholars continue to tell them, don't, we have the London and the Middle East Bank that was started in London. It's called the London Middle East Bank. It's 8 years old now. It started by the British. The British are offering sukuk. The British government is offering sukuk, Islamic Sharia compliant sukuk. It doesn't get more creeping than this. So, the British government is offering. Why is this? Because the scholars continue to say to the people, hold on, please, don't engage in riba. Wait, let's figure out something. Let's make this, figure out this little device here so that we keep you away from the clear-cut riba, even though it is a little bit deformed and it's a little bit awkward and it may not look a little all right to you, but let's just keep you away from the clear-cut riba until we get to a point where we could provide instruments and financial structures that are completely Sharia compliant, not only in form, but also in spirit. I think that they're doing a good job. I'm not one of them. And keep in mind that I don't like that whole section of fiqh, which is modern financial transactions. But I think that they are doing a good job.
Just one comment.
I'm just, I want to make sure that the sisters can ask questions if they want to.
Just one comment. I one time was walking into an airplane in an airport, and there was this huge sign that says HSBC, which is the bank that everyone knows. And they said that Sharia compliant financing system or market is in excess of like $400 or $500 billion. I don't remember the number.
$2 trillion last year.
This is like 4 or 5 years ago.
Last year, $2 trillion.
So they were after it because the money is there.
Yes, yeah, and if we just, be patient ourselves, then inshallah, more and more people will warm up to the concept, and then when we have enough momentum, enough leverage, enough traction, we could dictate more terms so that these devices are more compliant.
Not to change the complete topic, but in terms of buying money for one to the other, with Bitcoins, what is your ruling on stuff like that?
Bitcoins. I knew that this is coming. I don't have a position on Bitcoins because I don't have enough knowledge of Bitcoins. At al-Haj, we decided to defer this. We decided that this is not pertinent only to Muslims in the West, but it's pertinent to Muslims all over the world, and there are fiqh assemblies that are more sort of resourceful than us. and we want them to take this on. We want the Fiqh Assembly of, like the Fiqh Academy of the OIC to take this on, or other Fiqh assemblies that are more resourceful. But don't consider this to be a position. This is not a position. This is sort of forecasting, a prediction. Maybe they would consider it permissible. Unless in certain states, in certain countries, they consider it harmful to their economy and they decide that this is not permissible because of the harm to the economy, then in those countries, people should listen to their leaders and to their mashayikh and abstain if harm will ensue to the economy of their companies. Or to whatever concerns companies may have, intelligence concerns, that concerns, whatever concerns the countries may have, but I think eventually they'll consider this permissible. Why? Because money does not have intrinsic value in Islam. And Umar ibn Khattab said, I wish it was reported from Umar radiallahu anhu that he said, I wish that I would have been able to make money out of the hides of camels. They said to him, then you will have no camels will survive. And to spare the camels, he just missed the idea. So Omar was saying that money is whatever.
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I didn't understand.
Omar said, I wish I could make money out of the hides of camels. Currency.
Leather money, yeah.
Leather money. Sort of
Like paper.
Like paper money. So he recognized that money it does not have intrinsic value. Money is whatever people agree on to be a price, agree on like a nominal value for this note to be a price for commodities. Yeah. So now with the shift of power from states to corporations, you don't need Federal Reserve banks to issue money because power is already shifting from states to corporations. And at a speed that is just phenomenal. The presidents and monarchs and all of those people, they're not really running the world anymore. Yes, sisters, okay. Yeah.
Thank you for breaking down the different instruments. It helps me with the understanding. My question is, you mentioned Amja has looked at different companies that offer financing. How do we find out which ones are more closer to being Sharia compliant?
It's on Amja's website. The whole thing is on Amja's website in Arabic and English. So basically put financing, Islamic financing, and Amja, AMJA, for Islamic financing, and then it will come up, inshallah. All the names of the different companies. I don't prefer lectures to the name companies.
I have a question that is not related to Islamic financing, but is related to. So if there is no question about Islamic financing.
But keep in mind, I did not finish the Bitcoins thing, but this is not advice to invest in Bitcoins whatsoever. I don't know much about Bitcoins. It's just like whatever I know, it doesn't seem to me at this point that they look haram. Keep in mind that someone may say, should the Muslim business society or community wait for the scholars to take their time and come back next year and tell us it's halal or haram and we'd have already missed out on so much? The principle here is for the Muslim business people that the default is permissibility. It is not impermissibility. The default is permissibility. Unless they find something that makes them concerned that this is haram. But if they did not, and the scholars are not giving them a clear-cut answer, what is the default in transactions? Ibaha or hazr? Ibaha, permissibility. So if they don't find something that would tell them it is haram, they're not given a clear answer from the Mashayikh. The default for them until they get a clear answer is permissibility. Anything, you've seen anything better than this? But this is also not financial advice, because I heard from many people that it's probably not wise to invest in Bitcoins. But that's a completely different thing. Whether it is wise or not, clever or not, that's different from the halal and haram discussion. Yes?
My question is about what you said, you cannot sell what you don't own.
You can sell that which you don't own.
Yeah, so if I import equipment from overseas,
Yes.
and I sell it here in the United States, but before I import it, I would like to, I have some people who are going to buy it, so they are willing to put a deposit on it, and they will lose that if they change their mind. But I don't own it. If they put the deposit on it, I don't own it.
Bayo or bun is a different issue. So the deposit, is it fair to lose the deposit? I think it is fair to lose the deposit if they ask you to purchase this for them, and you purchase it for them. And
He doesn't have,
But
he
I don't
said
have-
he doesn't
I
have,
own it.
he does not own it yet.
Yes.
But he wants to guarantee that, those people are going to purchase
If
it.
it is describable, sort of
Yeah.
describable, and
Specifications and everything.
they give him a deposit. Now, this deposit is not a sale contract. This is just a deposit. Had it been a sale contract, they would have been responsible for this commodity completely.
Okay, so
They're only responsible for the deposit, so it is not a sale commodity. It is not a sale contract. It is not halal for you to finish the sale contract before you own and possess the commodity. But deposit is different.
Are there any other questions? We stop the recording.
that's a lot.
Jazakallah khairan.